Hello, and welcome to the lesson on conclusions and inferences. So let's play detective. Sometimes you hear or read the term making inferences or draw conclusions in an assignment. This means that you have to play detective and figure something out using the clues the reading gives you. So what will you learn today? We're going to talk about these two things. You're going to, by the end of this lesson, understand what a conclusion is, and you will learn how to look at evidence or clues in a reading to base your conclusion. You will also understand what inference is. You will learn how to look for evidence or clues in a reading and use your background knowledge to base your inference. So let's talk about conclusion first. A conclusion is basically taking evidence from the text plus other evidence from the text, and sometimes even more evidence from the text to create a conclusion. It's basically like reading a mystery or watching a mystery show on TV. You're looking at all of the different clues that you are given and then coming to a decision or a guess about what is going on. This would be your conclusion. You guys probably do this all the time and don't even realize it. How often do you watch a show or read a book and you're like, I know what's going to happen next? It's based on your conclusions of everything else that you've seen or read so far in that piece. So let's talk about some conclusion questions. Sometimes on a test or an exam, you might see a question that says, what has happened in the story? What will happen in the story? When does the story take place? And maybe even where are the characters? If you are asked any of these questions, you need to go back into the text and find the clues that you've been given to base your conclusion and answer these questions. Doesn't sound too hard, does it? Let's take a look at an example. So pretend you are at Walmart. You see a little boy screaming and pulling on his mom's skirt as she pushes the cart toward the store exit. He is screaming, "Candy!" while she just shakes her head and keeps going. The closer she gets to the exit, the louder the boy screams. So a lot of things can be wrong with this little boy, but what do you conclude? What do you think is going on with this poor little kid? So based on the clues that you've been given, he's screaming and he's screaming more as she gets closer to the exit. She's shaking her head and he's yelling candy. You can pretty much logically conclude that this little boy wants candy and realizes that the closer they get to the exit, the less chance he has of getting that candy. Did you guess that? You probably did. Not so hard, is it? Okay, let's look at another one. More clues. Pretend you are at the doctor's office to get a shot. A little boy is sitting there screaming his head off. His mom is rocking him in her arms. He keeps pulling at his right ear. So what can you conclude this time? Would it be A, he is still angry about not getting the candy? B, he has an earache? C, he is scared because he is there for a shot? Or D, he just cries a lot? Go ahead and choose one of those. Did you choose B, he has an earache? If you did, you got it right. Notice that it says you were at the doctor's office to get a shot. So the little boy is not getting a shot. You really have no idea why he's there until you start putting the rest of the clues together. He is screaming, but his mom is rocking him in her arms. Rocking is not ignoring a child because he's being spoiled and crying. She's trying to soothe him for some reason or another. And since you're at the doctor's office and he's pulling at his ear, it's probably a pretty fair conclusion to say this child has an earache. Okay. Let's move forward and talk about inference. Inference is a little bit different than conclusion in that an inference is a logical guess based on evidence and your own prior knowledge. What do you bring to this already? So you need to add what is in the passage to what you already know to come up with your inference. Here are some different type of inference questions that you might see on a test or a quiz or, Keystone. Not that we worry about that, right? What can the reader infer about the character? What inference can be made? What is the mood, the feeling created in the story? What is the character feeling? What is the character doing? Which of these best describes blank? Okay, so you need to look at these questions. You need to look at what you're given in the story, plus what you've experienced in your own past. So for instance, if you're looking at this one, what is the character feeling? You might see that the character is crying, or kind of talking nervously. You know, they're stuttering. They might be, you know, repeating their words, not quite sure what to say. Maybe based on that, you see how the author is describing the character. You think about when you've been acting nervous or crying, maybe you stuttered or not sure what to say, you can come to the conclusion that this character may be scared, right? Putting two and two together. Okay, so these are inference questions. To make an inference, you're going to need to look for evidence or details from the text. You need to use your mind and think about what you already know, and then move forward and make your inference. So let's look at another example here. Finding clues in a story to answer questions. Tommy and Sarah just got off the school bus. Sarah said, "I smell smoke." Tommy pointed and yelled, "Sarah, look at the smoke coming out of that house." In a moment, they both heard what sounded like a fire engine siren. So your question is, the passage suggests that A, the house is on fire and someone called to report it. B, the house is on fire and no one called to report it. C, someone was burning leaves in the backyard. Or D, this was a fire drill. Go ahead and give your answer for this one. Okay, so again, if you chose A, you're correct. Okay, we know that there's smoke. Sarah's pointing and saying there's smoke coming out of the house, not out of the backyard, and they hear a fire engine. Based on what you know, because I'm sure everybody here has heard fire engines, you know that a fire engine doesn't just show up. Someone has to call to report it. So you can guess A, the house is on fire and someone called to report it, and you will probably get the right answer in that inference question. Nice job. Okay, so let's take a look at our story, and this one we can bring back and we can talk about this in the classroom. This passage, there would be no one to live for her during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. Let's think about this passage. What can you infer about her marriage from these lines? We're going to bring this one back into the classroom and talk about it a little more with the story, but this is something I want you to dwell on for a moment. If you need to, even pause for a second and jot down your ideas. So here's another one from our story. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of joy that kills. This is our last line of the story. So based on the evidence in the story, would you have come to the same conclusion as the doctors? Now here, we're talking about the doctor's conclusion, what they're given, but you can use what you know about human nature and based upon what you've been given in the story to come to your own inference. Would you have concluded the same thing as the doctors? And explain. So these are our two questions. Be ready to talk about these when we come back into the classroom. Just a quick review again about inferences and conclusions. When people talk, they don't always say exactly what they mean. The same holds true for authors writing. The listener or reader must figure out what the speaker really means. Inference in reading is when you need to use the clues written in a story or to draw a conclusion. In other words, you need to be a word detective. You will not always be right when you draw a conclusion from a story, but the more you try it and the more skilled you become, the better you'll get at it. Being a good reader and word detective is a good thing. Thank you for participating. If you have any questions, please ask your teacher.